Everyone in the banquet hall thought Elena was only there to be humiliated. Just hours earlier, her husband Marcus had tossed divorce papers across their kitchen table like she was trash. He called her a poor nobody, mocked her second-hand dress, and laughed as he told her she should be grateful he had tolerated her for this long. Then, with the cruelest smile, he invited her to his promotion banquet, only so she could watch him rise into the rich, powerful world he believed she could never touch. Beside him that night stood Vanessa, his wealthy boss, dripping in diamonds and arrogance, already acting like the woman who had replaced his wife. The room applauded Marcus. Cameras flashed. Champagne glasses lifted. He was seconds away from being announced as regional director of a billion-dollar expansion deal. Then the doors opened. Elena walked in, not crying, not begging, not broken. She entered with 6 security guards behind her, a black folder in her hand, and a silence so sharp it cut through the music. Marcus smirked at first, thinking she had come to embarrass herself one final time. But then the CEO stood. Then Vanessa turned pale. Then every executive in the room lowered their eyes. Because the poor nobody Marcus had thrown away was the secret billionaire investor who had approved the entire deal. She owned the funding, the contract, and the future he had been celebrating. Elena stopped in front of the stage, looked directly at her husband, and said 10 words that made his champagne glass slip from his hand. "Your promotion is cancelled, and so is your future here." The whole room went silent. For 3 long seconds, nobody moved. The champagne flute hit the marble floor and shattered beside Marcus's polished shoes, spilling golden liquid across the white stone like a crown melting away. The orchestra, which had been playing soft music near the far wall, stopped in the middle of a note. Somewhere in the back of the banquet hall, a woman gasped. Cameras that had been raised toward the stage lowered slowly, as if every hand holding one had suddenly remembered fear. Marcus stared at Elena with a smile still trapped on his face, but it was no longer a smile. It was the stiff, confused mask of a man who had walked onto a bridge and realized too late there was no bridge beneath him. "Elena," he said, laughing once. The sound was dry and cracked. "What is this?" She did not answer immediately. That was the first thing that frightened him. For 7 years of marriage, Elena had always answered him quickly, too quickly. She had explained herself when he accused her of spending too much on groceries. She had apologized when he complained that dinner was late, even though she had been at the hospital with his mother. She had lowered her voice when he raised his. She had swallowed tears and put away plates and ironed shirts and carried silence like a second skin. But tonight, she simply looked at him. Behind her, the 6 security guards remained still, not dramatic, not aggressive, just present. Their quiet confidence told the room they were not there for decoration. Their earpieces glinted beneath the chandeliers. Their black suits were plain, expensive, and official. One held a tablet. Another stood near the banquet doors, as if no one would leave until Elena decided they could. Vanessa's hand tightened around Marcus's arm. Her diamond bracelet slid down her wrist and clicked softly against her watch. That tiny sound carried through the hall. "Elena," Marcus repeated, louder this time, "you're embarrassing yourself." The old sentence, the familiar blade. For years, it had worked. It had made Elena shrink at dinner parties. It had made her laugh nervously when Marcus mocked her education in front of his coworkers. It had made her pretend not to notice when he introduced her as "my wife. She doesn't really understand business." It had made her sit quietly at charity auctions where people wearing perfume more expensive than her monthly rent spoke over her as if she were a chair. But tonight, the words fell at her feet and died there. "No, Marcus," Elena said. Her voice was calm enough to sound almost gentle. "You did that yourself." A ripple moved through the room. Marcus glanced around, irritated by the witnesses. There were board members in black tuxedos, investors in silk gowns, senior partners from 3 different countries, journalists who had been invited to cover the company's historic expansion, and employees who had spent months whispering that Marcus Vail was about to become the youngest regional director in the company's history. He had wanted this audience. He had begged for this audience. Only hours ago, while Elena stood in their kitchen with divorce papers in one hand and a cracked mug in the other, he had said, "Come tonight. You should see what real success looks like before you crawl back to whatever miserable life you had before me." Now every face in that audience watched him. The CEO, Arthur Langford, walked down from the side of the stage. His grey hair was combed back perfectly, but his expression had lost its smooth corporate ease. He stopped 2 steps behind Elena and bowed his head slightly. "Miss Bellamy," he said. Marcus blinked. "Not Elena Vale. Not Mrs. Vale. Miss Bellamy." His mouth opened, but no words came out. Elena saw the moment the name reached him, not understanding yet, just impact, like a stone dropped through ice. Bellamy was the name she had not used in years, except on documents locked inside safes, trust agreements sealed beneath attorney stamps, and investment contracts signed in offices where men like Marcus waited outside glass walls, never imagining the quiet woman in plain shoes was the person deciding whether their dreams would live or die. Vanessa took a step backward. "You know her?" Marcus demanded, looking at Arthur. Arthur's face tightened. Everyone at this level should know who Miss Bellamy is. At this level. The words did what Elena's silence had not. They struck Marcus hard enough that his shoulders shifted. He looked at her again, this time more carefully, as if searching her face for something he had missed. But he had missed everything. That was the problem. He had spent years looking at Elena and seeing only what his pride needed her to be. A poor nobody. A grateful wife. A soft place to put his failures. A woman he could outgrow. Elena opened the black folder. Inside were documents Marcus had never seen, though his entire future had depended on them. Funding approval forms, ethics reports, board recommendations, internal review summaries, a photograph clipped to the corner of one page. Marcus saw only a flash of his own face beside Vanessa's, taken outside the Meridian Hotel 2 months earlier, but his stomach dropped before his mind had time to defend him. "Elena," he whispered. This time there was no laughter in it. She looked down at the first page, then up at the room. The promotion of Marcus Vale was contingent upon investor approval, she said. It was also contingent upon the executive conduct clause attached to the expansion deal. As majority private backer of the Meridian acquisition and chair of the Bellamy Trust Investment Board, I am exercising my right to withdraw approval. The journalists began typing. The sound was soft at first, then everywhere. Marcus heard it like rain before a flood. "You can't do that," he said. Elena turned one page. "I can. This is personal. It became personal when you made it public." Vanessa's face hardened. "Ms. Bellamy, perhaps we should discuss this privately." Elena finally looked at her. Vanessa had the kind of beauty that came sharpened, maintained, and weaponized. She was dressed in silver satin, her hair pinned high, her lips painted a deep red that made every word look expensive. For the last year, Marcus had said her name too often. Vanessa believes. Vanessa says. Vanessa thinks I'm wasted in my current role. Vanessa knows talent when she sees it. Elena had known about Vanessa long before Marcus thought to hide her. She had known from the way his phone turned face down, from the sudden gym membership, from the cologne he had never worn before, from the late meetings that smelled like wine, from the blue silk scarf she found once in his car, folded beneath the passenger seat, a scarf Marcus claimed belonged to a client's wife. Elena had not confronted him then. Not because she was weak. Because she was waiting. Her father had taught her that patience was not the same as surrender. He had taught her that when a snake crossed your garden, you did not scream and chase it blindly. You watched where it nested. You learned how many eggs it had laid. You waited until you could remove the whole danger at once. Elena, Marcus used to mock whenever she paused before speaking. You always look like you're planning something. He had been right. He had simply been too arrogant to fear it. "We can discuss this right here," Elena said to Vanessa. "You seemed comfortable discussing my marriage in public." Vanessa's cheeks colored. Several employees exchanged glances. They had heard things. Of course they had. Offices ran on coffee, ambition, and secrets. Marcus and Vanessa had been careless in the way powerful people became careless when they believed everyone beneath them was too afraid to speak. Elena turned another page. "Arthur," she said without looking back, "please confirm for the board that Ms. Carrington personally recommended Marcus Vale for regional director." Arthur cleared his throat. "She did." "And that she oversaw the internal performance review." "Yes." "And that she failed to disclose a personal relationship with him." The room went so still, it felt sealed. Vanessa snapped, "That is an accusation." Elena lifted the photograph. It was projected onto the massive screen behind the stage before anyone saw who had connected the tablet. One of the security guards had moved with such smooth timing that it seemed planned down to the second. The screen, which moments ago had displayed Marcus's smiling headshot under the words Rising Leadership Award, now showed Marcus and Vanessa stepping out of a private elevator at the Meridian Hotel. His hand rested on the small of her back. Her head was turned toward him, laughing. The timestamp glowed in the corner. Then came another image. And another. Dinner receipts, hotel records, messages, a calendar invitation disguised under a project code name, a transfer of company funds to cover what had been labeled as client entertainment. Marcus's throat closed. He remembered the hotel, remembered laughing as Vanessa told him Elena looked sweet in a tragic little way, remembered the way he had repeated the joke later in his head and found it comforting. Elena had been easy to belittle because she never fought back in ways he recognized. She did not slam doors, she did not scream, she did not make scenes. She kept records. That was the difference between them. Marcus made noise. Elena made evidence. Arthur turned toward Vanessa with visible disgust. "Ms. Carrington, is this accurate?" Vanessa recovered faster than Marcus did. That was why she had climbed so far. "The context is missing," she said. "These are private materials, and I strongly question how they were obtained." Elena closed the folder halfway. "Legally. You expect us to believe that?" "No," Elena said. "I expect your legal department to confirm it." At the mention of legal, 3 people near the front row shifted at once. One of them, a woman with cropped white hair and black glasses, stood slowly. Marcus recognized her as the company's general counsel. She did not look surprised. That frightened him more than anything else. "Elena," Marcus said, stepping down from the stage. "Enough." The security guards moved subtly, not blocking him completely, just reminding him that distance was no longer his choice. His pride flared, hot and desperate. "You're my wife." A strange, almost sad smile touched her face. "You threw divorce papers at me this morning." He swallowed. "I was angry." "You were honest." The words carried her backward for a heartbeat, away from the chandeliers and cameras, back to the small yellow kitchen where everything had ended long before Marcus knew it had. That morning, sunlight had come through the blinds in thin stripes across the table. Elena had been making coffee, not for herself. She had stopped drinking it months ago because stress had made her hands shake. She made it for Marcus because he liked it black, because she remembered small things even when the person receiving them forgot kindness was not weakness. He came in wearing the navy suit she had picked up from the cleaners. The suit she had paid for. He did not thank her, he never did anymore. Instead, he dropped a thick envelope onto the table. At first, she thought it was a bill. Then she saw the name of the law firm. He watched her open it with the same expression he wore when checking quarterly reports. No discomfort. No grief. Only impatience. "I want this handled cleanly," he said. "No drama, no begging, no pretending you didn't see it coming." Elena had looked at the papers, at the neat black words dissolving 7 years into clauses and signatures. Her hands did not shake. That surprised her. Somewhere inside, something had already broken so thoroughly there were no fragments left to tremble. "Why today?" she asked. Marcus laughed, annoyed. "Because my life is finally moving forward. And I'm not part of that life." "You never were," he said. She remembered the sound of the refrigerator humming, the neighbor's dog barking twice, a spoon on the counter catching sunlight, ordinary details, cruelly bright, arranging themselves around the moment her marriage died. Then he leaned back against the counter and looked at her dress. It was simple blue cotton, faded at the hem from too many washes. She had bought it at a thrift shop years ago, not because she could not afford better, but because old habits lived in the body. As a child, Elena had learned that money could vanish overnight. Her father's fortune had not protected her mother from loneliness or her from men who smiled at wealth and ignored pain. Simplicity had been her hiding place long before Marcus mistook it for poverty. "You should wear that tonight," Marcus said. "It suits you." She looked up. "Tonight?" "My banquet," he smiled. "Vanessa insisted spouses be included. I think she feels sorry for you." Elena said nothing. "She's classy that way," he added. "You could learn from her." In the old days, the words would have hurt first and angered her later. That morning, they passed through her and found no place to land. Marcus took the mug she had made for him, drank half, and grimaced. Cold. Then he set it down beside the divorce papers. The coffee stain spread slowly across the corner of the envelope, darkening the name of the law firm like a warning. Elena remembered thinking, not yet. Not because she wanted to save him. Because there were still papers to sign. Years earlier, on the day she married Marcus, her father's attorney had pulled her aside before the ceremony. "You should tell him enough to protect yourself," Mr. Hawthorne had said. He was an old man even then, with silver brows and a habit of tapping contracts as if they were living things that might misbehave. Secrets inside a marriage grow teeth. Elena had looked through the window at Marcus standing beneath an arch of white roses. He had been handsome in a hopeful, hungry way, not cruel then, or perhaps not openly cruel. He was the son of a mechanic and a school receptionist, the first in his family to graduate college, a man who worked late and dreamed loudly. He loved success with the desperation of someone who believed failure would drag him back into a life he hated. "He doesn't care about money," Elena had told Hawthorne. The old attorney had sighed. "People often don't care about money until they smell it." But Elena had believed in love the way lonely daughters of powerful men sometimes did. She believed love meant being chosen without the weight of her name. She believed Marcus loved her because he thought she was ordinary. When he proposed with a modest ring and shaking hands, she had cried from relief, not because the ring was small, but because his love seemed free of calculation. So she kept the Bellamy name folded away. She told him only that her parents had died, that she had some family investments managed by attorneys, that she preferred a quiet life. Marcus never asked much beyond that. In the beginning, she mistook his lack of curiosity for respect. Later, she understood it was disinterest. He had not asked who she was because he had already decided she was not important. The first year of marriage was gentle enough to deceive her. Marcus brought her flowers from grocery stores. He called her my calm place. He ate her pasta standing at the stove and kissed her shoulder. When he got his first corporate job, he came home dizzy with joy and spun her around the living room until they both fell onto the couch laughing. He told her he would build them a life where nobody could look down on them. At night, Elena would sometimes wake and find him at the desk, staring at job postings, salary charts, luxury apartments online. There was something restless in him, a hunger that did not sleep. She would place a blanket over his shoulders. He would cover her hand with his and whisper, "Just a little longer. I'm going to become someone." "You already are someone," she would say. He would smile, but never like he believed her. The first insult came in the 3rd year. It happened at a company dinner after Marcus had been passed over for a promotion. He drank too much. A senior manager joked about spouses being silent investors in ambition, and Marcus said, "Elena invests in coupons." Everyone laughed. Elena laughed too, because the room expected it. On the drive home, she stared out the window while rain made the city lights blur. Marcus apologized before they reached their apartment. He sounded ashamed. He said he was embarrassed, that he had felt small in front of men who owned summer houses and spoke 3 languages and wore watches worth more than his car. "I didn't mean it," he said. "I know," she replied. And because she loved him, she treated the wound like an accident. That was how it began, not with a storm, with a joke, a tiny crack in the wall, a hairline fracture no one else could see. But cracks spread quietly. By the 5th year, he corrected her in public even when she was right. By the 6th, he stopped asking about her day. By the 7th, he had learned to call cruelty ambition and selfishness self-improvement. Elena had watched it happen with the dread of someone seeing a house slowly fill with smoke, while everyone else admired the curtains. She had almost told him everything twice. The first time was after he came home furious because the board had questioned his department's projections. He sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands, whispering, "I need someone powerful in my corner." Elena stood behind him, touching the Bellamy signet ring she wore on a chain beneath her sweater. It had belonged to her father. She could have made one call. She could have opened doors Marcus did not know existed. She could have placed him in rooms where his name would be spoken with interest. But then he lifted his head and said, "Vanessa understands this world. She says some people are born with leverage. The rest of us have to take it." Elena's hand fell away from the ring. The second time was 2 months before the banquet, after she found the scarf in his car. She waited until dinner, placed it beside his plate, and asked calmly, "Whose is this?" Marcus looked at it for half a second too long. Then he smiled. That smile told her more than any confession could. "Don't start," he said. "I'm asking a question." "No, you're doing that quiet, wounded thing." He pushed back his chair. "It's exhausting, Elena. Do you know that? Being around you is like being trapped in a room with someone who has already accepted defeat." She looked at him, the blue scarf between them like a river. He walked out before dinner cooled. That night, Elena sat alone at the table and remembered her mother's last warning. "Never beg someone to see you," her mother had said from a hospital bed, her voice thin but fierce. "The ones who want to be blind will call the sun darkness." Elena had been 19 then, too young to lose both parents within a year, too young to inherit a fortune built from shipping, infrastructure, private equity, and land her great-grandfather had bought when cities were still fields, too young to understand that money did not stop grief, it only made grief echo through larger rooms. After her mother died, Elena disappeared from the society pages. She finished school quietly, placed most of her inheritance into the Bellamy Trust, and built a private investment network under layers of advisors and holding companies. She learned contracts the way other people learned prayers. She learned that power did not have to shout. Often, the most powerful person in a room was the one nobody recognized. That was why she noticed the Meridian deal before Marcus ever mentioned it. It came across her desk under the title Southeast Regional Expansion Initiative. The company Marcus worked for, Langford & Co., wanted to acquire a failing luxury hotel chain and convert it into a mixed-use commercial network. The deal was ambitious, risky, and potentially brilliant. It needed private funding. It needed patience. It needed someone willing to see value where others saw decay. Elena saw the numbers and approved preliminary review. Then she saw Marcus's name attached to the implementation team. For 2 weeks, she considered withdrawing immediately. But that would have been fear, and Elena had spent too much of her life letting men's choices decide the size of her world, so she allowed the review to continue. She kept professional walls high. She signed through her trust. She communicated through Hawthorne and a small investment board. Her identity remained confidential, as it often did. In deals of that size, privacy protected everyone from theater. Then the ethics reports began. At first they were minor. expense irregularities, preferential treatment, Vanessa Carrington pushing unusually hard for Marcus's promotion. A senior analyst named Priya flagged the numbers and sent a confidential note through the review channel. Possible conflict, recommend deeper audit. Elena read it at midnight while Marcus slept beside her, his phone glowing beneath his pillow. Outside, rain tapped the window. Inside, the truth tapped harder. She authorized the audit. After that, the evidence arrived steadily, each piece another shadow falling into place. Dinner receipts, hotel stays, private messages recovered through company devices, witness statements from employees who had been pressured to alter performance scores, a junior manager who said Marcus took credit for her team's work, another who said Vanessa threatened to bury anyone who questioned the promotion. Elena read every report. She read them in silence at the kitchen table while Marcus complained about how small-minded people were jealous of him. She read them in the passenger seat while Marcus drove and talked about Vanessa's strategic brilliance. She read them after he fell asleep, his wedding ring abandoned on the nightstand because he claimed it made his finger itch. The heavier the evidence became, the calmer Elena grew. There was a kind of mercy in certainty. Pain became cleaner when doubt left the room. By the night before the banquet, Elena knew three things. Marcus had betrayed their marriage. Vanessa had corrupted the promotion process. And Langford and Co. would become a liability unless the rot was cut out publicly enough that no one could pretend they had not seen it. Still, when Marcus threw the divorce papers at her the next morning, some foolish last part of her heart had waited. It waited for hesitation, regret, a crack in his cruelty, anything. Instead, he invited her to watch him celebrate with the woman who had helped him betray her. That was when the last soft thread snapped. Now, standing in the banquet hall beneath 1,000 crystals, Elena felt that snapped thread no longer as loss, but as freedom. Marcus seemed to be agging in front of her. His face had gone pale beneath the warm lights. His tuxedo, which had fit him like victory when he entered the room, now looked too tight at the collar. "You set me up," he said. Elena's eyes narrowed slightly. "No, I let you reveal yourself. You hid who you were." "Yes, for 7 years. Yes." His voice rose. "You lied to me." A sound moved through the room, not laughter, not sympathy, but disbelief. Elena's expression did not change. "I never lied about my character, you lied about yours." Marcus flinched, as if she had slapped him. It would have been easier if she had. Physical pain could be dramatized, moral exposure could not. It simply stood there under lights and let everyone look. Vanessa stepped toward Arthur. "This is unacceptable. You cannot allow an investor's marital dispute to derail a corporate appointment." Arthur looked at her for a long moment. "A corporate appointment you manipulated." "I did no such thing." The general counsel spoke from the front row. Vanessa stopped talking. That more than the evidence broke through Vanessa's composure. Her lips parted. Her eyes flashed toward the board members, searching for allies. She found none. People who had laughed with her over champagne now studied the floor, the centerpieces, the emergency exits. Power attracted loyalty until power started leaking. Marcus noticed. He noticed the men who had slapped his back an hour ago, suddenly unable to meet his eyes. He noticed the senior vice president who had promised to put in a word, turning away. He noticed Priya, the analyst he had once dismissed as too timid for leadership, standing near the back with tears bright in her eyes, not tears of sadness, he realized, but relief. And at the edge of the hall, he noticed a small woman in a navy uniform. "Lydia, their housekeeper." "No, not theirs, Elena." She had worked in their apartment twice a week for 3 years, quiet and kind, always bringing Elena fresh lilies when Marcus forgot anniversaries. Marcus had barely acknowledged her except to complain if shirts were folded wrong. Now Lydia stood beside one of Elena's security guards. Holding Elena's old grey coat. Not a guest. Not staff. Trusted. The realization unsettled him in a way he could not explain. It suggested there had been an entire map of Alina's life drawn in invisible ink, and he had been walking across it blind. "Alina," he said, lowering his voice. He took one cautious step closer. "Let's go home." Home. The word rose between them like a ghost. Their apartment had never truly been poor, though Marcus called it that whenever he compared it to Vanessa's penthouse. It had warm wooden floors, a balcony with potted herbs, and shelves full of books Alina had collected from used bookstores because she liked the notes strangers left in margins. It had a couch with one sunken cushion where Marcus used to fall asleep during old movies. It had a tiny scar on the kitchen table from the night they tried to make caramel and burn the pot. Home had been real once. Or maybe Alina had made it real enough for both of them. She remembered Marcus in their second year of marriage, sick with fever, clinging to her hand like a child. She remembered him whispering, "Don't leave," while half asleep. She remembered thinking she never would. But love made promises to the person it knew. Not to the stranger that person chose to become. "There is no home for us anymore," Alina said. His mouth tightened, humiliation curdled into anger. "So that's it? You ruined my life in front of everyone because I wanted a divorce. No, you lost your promotion because you violated company policy, benefited from a hidden relationship with your supervisor, participated in financial misreporting, and allowed others to be punished for questioning you. I worked for everything I have. So did the people you stepped on. You think you're better than me because you inherited money." The words rang loud and ugly. Alina stood very still. For the first time that night, something like grief moved across her face. Not weakness, not regret, a deeper thing, the grief of realizing someone had understood nothing, not even at the end. "My father inherited money," she said quietly. "Then he built ports in cities banks had abandoned. My mother funded schools in neighborhoods politicians only visited during campaigns. I inherited responsibility. You inherited resentment and called it ambition." Marcus's jaw flexed. "When we met," she continued, "I admired your hunger. I thought it meant courage. I did not understand it was a wound you kept feeding." His face twisted. "Don't analyze me. I spent years making excuses for you. That ends tonight." Vanessa suddenly laughed. It was a sharp, brittle sound. "This is absurd. Marcus, say something useful." Marcus turned toward her, and for one revealing second, Alina saw the truth between them. Not love, panic, alliance under pressure. Two climbers tied together on a rope, realizing one slip would drag both down. Vanessa's eyes warned him. "Do not collapse. Do not confess. Do not make me carry this." Marcus straightened, grabbing at the last weapon he knew. "Fine," he said, facing the room. "You want the truth? My marriage has been dead for years. Alina is unstable. She's been obsessed with controlling me. She hid billions from her own husband. What kind of woman does that?" The room stayed silent. He pushed harder. "She sat at my table, ate meals I paid for, lived under my roof, and pretended to be some humble little wife while secretly judging me." Alina almost smiled. Meals he paid for. His roof. The apartment was owned outright through one of her holding companies. His car had been purchased after she quietly paid off his graduate debt. His mother's surgery, the one he believed had been covered by a miraculous hospital grant, had been funded by Alina through a medical foundation because she refused to let pride decide an old woman's survival. For years, she had given without attaching her name. Now Marcus mistook her silence for dependence. Arthur stepped forward. "Marcus, stop." But Marcus was beyond hearing. Public shame had opened something frantic in him. He pointed toward Alina. "She's punishing me because I chose Vanessa, because I chose someone on my level." Vanessa's face froze. That sentence did not save him. It condemned her with him. Alina watched Vanessa absorb it. The tiny flicker in her eyes said she understood. Marcus had just confirmed what she had denied. The general counsel was already writing something on her tablet. Marcus saw it too late. "I mean," he began. Elena closed the folder. The sound was soft. "Final. Arthur," she said, "the Bellamy Trust will proceed with the acquisition only under revised conditions. Immediate suspension of Marcus Vale. Immediate suspension of Vanessa Carrington, pending full ethics investigation. Independent review of all appointments connected to the Meridian project. Formal protection for employees who submitted confidential reports. Public clarification before tomorrow morning's market briefing." Arthur nodded, agreed. "Additionally," Elena said, "Priya Nair's team will receive direct credit for the integration model used in the final proposal." At the back of the room, Priya covered her mouth. Marcus turned. That name again, that woman again. A junior analyst he had dismissed, interrupted, stolen from. He remembered once leaving her presentation notes in a conference room trash bin after copying the best parts into his own deck. When she protested, Vanessa told her she needed to become less emotionally attached to ideas. And now Elena had spoken Priya's name in front of every executive in the company. Recognition moved through the room like light. "Elena," Arthur said, "we can arrange that." "No," Elena said, "you can correct it." Arthur bowed his head. "We will correct it." It was the first honest sentence Marcus had heard from him all night, and it terrified him. Security stepped closer to Marcus and Vanessa. Vanessa pulled her arm free from Marcus as if contact with him might stain her. "I'm calling my attorney." "You should," said the general counsel. Vanessa looked at Elena with hatred sharp enough to glitter. "You think this makes you powerful?" Elena met her eyes. "No, it reminds you that power without integrity is only borrowed time." The phrase struck Marcus strangely. Borrowed time. He had heard Elena say something like that before, years ago, on a winter afternoon after they visited her parents' grave. He had complained about the cold, about the drive, about how quiet she became in cemeteries. She had stood before two marble stones engraved with the Bellamy name, though Marcus, impatient and uninterested, had never looked closely. "My father used to say every empire runs on borrowed time," she told him then. "The only question is whether you spend it building or stealing." Marcus had kissed her forehead and said, "You think too much." He wished suddenly, painfully, that he had looked at the stones. At the name. At her. Security escorted Vanessa first. She did not struggle. Women like Vanessa understood appearances even in defeat. She lifted her chin, walked past the staring crowd, and disappeared through the banquet doors with two guards and the general counsel behind her. Marcus remained. For a moment, he seemed unable to accept that the same would happen to him. "Elena," he said again, but her name had changed in his mouth. It was no longer an accusation. It was a plea wearing the torn coat of one. She did not move. "You loved me," he said. That one hurt. Not because it was false. Because it was true. Elena saw them as they had been. Marcus on one knee in the park after rain, holding a ring he could barely afford. Marcus crying in the hospital hallway when his mother came out of surgery. Marcus falling asleep with his head in Elena's lap while she ran her fingers through his hair. Marcus saying, "You make me feel safe," before he learned to despise safety because it did not look like status. "I did," she said. His eyes reddened. "Then how can you do this?" Her voice softened, and somehow that softness made the room lean in harder. "Because I loved myself too late, but not too late to stop you." One of the guards touched Marcus's arm. He jerked away. "Don't touch me." Arthur spoke quietly. "Marcus, leave with dignity." Marcus laughed bitterly. "Dignity? You let her ambush me." "No," Arthur said. "She saved the company from us, ignoring what we should have seen." It was not a heroic confession. It was corporate survival, polished and belated. but it was enough to make several board members look uncomfortable. Elena had expected that too. Institutions rarely grew consciences. They grew liability concerns and later named them values. Marcus stared the banquet hall one last time. At the stage where his name still glowed faintly behind the evidence screen. At the tables where his promotion dinner had become a tribunal. At Elena, standing in the same faded blue dress he had mocked, though now he noticed what he should have noticed years ago. The dress was clean, simple, intentional, not poverty, choice. Her only jewelry was the ring on a chain at her throat, the Bellamy crest catching the chandelier light. He had once asked about it early in their marriage. Family thing, she had said. Worth anything. She had smiled sadly, more than I can explain. He had forgotten. Of course he had. As security led him toward the doors, whispers followed, not loud ones, worse, controlled whispers, professional whispers, the kind that became official statements, board minutes, revised histories. He looked back once, maybe expecting Elena to follow, to soften, to save him from the ending he had written. She did not. When the doors closed behind him, the room exhaled. Elena felt no triumph. That surprised some people later when they tried to describe her. They would say she was cold, ruthless, magnificent, a secret queen revealing herself. They would forget the small tremor she hid by pressing the black folder against her side. They would not see the cost of standing in front of strangers and turning your heartbreak into evidence. Arthur approached her carefully. Ms. Bellamy. Not now, she said. He stopped. I want the employee protections drafted tonight, she continued. Not announced, drafted. I want Priya and her team contacted by independent counsel, not internal management. I want Vanessa's access revoked before she reaches her car. I want Marcus's company devices secured. Arthur nodded. It will be done. Elena looked at him fully. Arthur, do not mistake my composure for patience. His face drained slightly. Understood. She turned toward Priya. The young analyst stood frozen near the back, surrounded by co-workers who now looked at her with dawning respect. She was petite, with dark hair pinned messily and a green dress that looked chosen in a hurry. Elena recognized the exhaustion around her eyes, the look of someone who had been right for months and punished for saying so. Elena walked to her. The crowd parted. Priya straightened as if bracing for another blow. Ms. Bellamy, I. Thank you, Elena said. Priya blinked. For what? For telling the truth when it cost you. Her eyes filled again. I thought no one read the report. I did. They told me I was being difficult. You were being accurate. A laugh broke out of Priya, small and shaky. That's not usually rewarded. It will be tonight. Priya looked past Elena toward the closed doors. I'm sorry about your husband. Elena glanced down at her ring chain. So am I. And she was. That was the part revenge stories often forgot. Justice did not erase the years. It did not return the version of Marcus who had danced barefoot with her in the kitchen. It did not unmake every lonely dinner, every insult, every morning she woke beside someone who saw less of her each day. It did not refund the love. It only stopped the debt from growing. Outside the banquet hall, Marcus stood in a service corridor between two security guards, his phone useless in his hand. His access had already been cut off. Email, company chat, executive files, all gone. He tried Vanessa. No answer. He tried again, straight to voicemail. He texted her 3 times. We need to talk. Call me. Vanessa, don't do this. The messages remained unread. For the first time in years, Marcus felt the cold terror of being ordinary. Not ordinary like Elena, whom he had mistaken for small. Ordinary like a man without leverage, without allies, without a room waiting to applaud him. He looked through the narrow glass pane in the banquet door and saw Elena speaking to Arthur. She looked composed, almost distant. The guards near him exchanged no words. That somehow made it worse. If they had mocked him, he could have hated them. Their professionalism denied him even that comfort. His mind scrambled backward, searching for where it had gone wrong. The divorce papers, Vanessa, the reports, the first lie. But deeper than those, beneath excuses and timelines, another memory rose. He was 29, standing outside a bookstore where Alina worked part-time when they met. Rain had started suddenly. He had no umbrella. Alina stepped beside him and offered half of hers without asking where he was going. He had been drawn to her quiet immediately, not because he respected it, because it soothed the noise inside him. She listened when he talked about wanting to become more than his father, more than his neighborhood, more than the teachers who said he was smart but unfocused. She made him feel seen before he had earned anything worth seeing. On their third date, he asked, "What do you want?" Alina considered the question. For so long he laughed. "I want a life where I don't have to perform," she said. He had thought that was charming. Later, he would call it laziness. Now, in the corridor, he understood too late that Alina had never been lazy. She had been free from the hunger that ruled him. She did not need applause to know she existed. That had irritated him before it frightened him. He had spent years trying to make her feel small because her stillness made his chasing look desperate. A guard said, "Mr. Vale, you need to come with us." "I'm not a criminal," Marcus snapped. "No one said you were." Not yet, Marcus thought, and the fear tasted metallic. Inside the hall, the banquet changed shape. The promotion banner was removed. Journalists were instructed to wait for an official statement. Some guests left quickly, eager to escape before being photographed near scandal. Others remained, drawn by the gravity of power shifting in real time. The orchestra resumed after a while, but the music sounded different, cautious and low. Alina stood near a side window overlooking the city. Below, traffic moved in thin streams of red and white. People went home, met friends, bought groceries, argued in taxis, kissed under awnings, lived entire lives unaware that on the 32nd floor of the Langford Grand Hotel, a man's empire of lies had collapsed between the salad course and dessert. Lydia approached with the grey coat. "You did well," she said. Alina smiled faintly. "Did I?" "You stood straight." "That's not the same thing." "It is when your knees want otherwise." Alina looked at her, and for the first time that night her eyes shone. Lydia had been her mother's housekeeper once, then estate manager, then something closer to family than anyone else dared name. She had held Alina after the funeral. She had packed away gowns and society invitations when Alina decided to disappear. She had warned her gently about Marcus, not because Marcus was obviously cruel at first, but because he looked at rooms before he looked at people. "He counts exits," Lydia had said after meeting him. Alina had laughed then. "Maybe he's nervous." "Maybe," Lydia replied, "or maybe he's always looking for a better door." That sentence returned many times over the years. Each time Marcus came home with a new complaint, a new comparison, a new hunger. Each time he praised someone richer, sharper, colder. Each time he treated Alina like the room he was trapped in while searching for a better door. Tonight he had found one. It had led out. "I kept thinking," Alina said softly, "that if I waited, he would remember who he used to be." Lydia placed the coat around her shoulders. "Sometimes people remember, sometimes they resent the witness." "The witness? You knew him before the mask fit. Some people hate that." Alina closed her eyes briefly. Across the hall, Arthur was speaking with board members. Priya stood with two colleagues, one of whom kept squeezing her hand. The projection screen had gone dark. The flowers on the tables, white orchids and pale roses, looked absurdly delicate after the night's violence of truth. Alina's phone vibrated. A message from Hawthorne. "The temporary injunction is ready if Marcus contests asset separation. Also, I told you the banquet would be dramatic. You owe me tea." Despite everything, Alina laughed. Lydia raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Hawthorne." He wants tea. He always wants tea when lawsuits begin. Elena typed back, "You warn me about secrets with teeth." The reply came almost immediately. "I warned you about men with appetites." Elena looked toward the doors. Somewhere beyond them, Marcus was discovering that every key he thought he owned had been borrowed. Her phone vibrated again. This time from an unknown number. "Elena, please, 5 minutes. Alone, you owe me that." "Marcus." Lydia saw her expression shift. "No. I didn't say anything." "You breathed like someone considering a mistake." Elena stared at the message. "You owe me that." There it was again, his favorite accounting system. He counted only what he had given, never what he had taken. He believed love created permanent debt. He believed apologies could be replaced by access. Another message appeared. "I know I hurt you, but you destroyed me." Elena's thumb hovered. She could ignore him, she should ignore him. But some endings demanded a final locked door, not merely distance. She turned to one of the guards. "Where is he?" "Private holding room near the service elevator. Legal is waiting." Lydia's mouth pressed thin. "Elena." "I won't be alone," Elena said. She replied with 4 words. 5 minutes with counsel." Marcus stared at the message when it arrived, anger and relief twisting together. With counsel, of course. Even now, she would not give him the intimacy of an unguarded conversation. The thought enraged him, then terrified him, because he realized he did not know what he would say if she did. The private room was small, with beige walls and a conference table meant for event staff. Marcus sat on one side, jacket off, bow tie loosened. He looked less like an executive now and more like a groom abandoned before photographs. When Elena entered with Hawthorne on speakerphone and one security guard by the door, Marcus stood. For a moment, neither spoke. Without the banquet hall between them, without the audience, the scene became stranger and sadder. Husband and wife in a service room, carrying 7 years like broken furniture, neither could sit down quietly. "Elena," Marcus said, "you have 5 minutes." His eyes flicked to the phone in her hand. "Is that necessary?" "Yes. I'm your husband. Temporarily." He inhaled sharply. "Good," she thought, let the word land. He dragged a hand through his hair. "I didn't know. That I had money. That you were this. Powerful." Elena stuttered him. "Would it have changed how you treated me?" "Yes," he said immediately. The honesty was worse than a lie. Elena felt Hawthorne go silent on the line. Even the guard at the door seemed to become more still. Marcus realized what he had admitted and stepped toward her. "No, I mean, Elena, come on. Anyone would act differently if they knew their wife was secretly controlling billion-dollar deals." "Thank you for clarifying. That's not what I meant." "It is exactly what you meant." He slapped his palm lightly against the table, not violent, but frustrated. "You made me feel like a fool." "No, Marcus. I allowed you to believe what you wanted because I hoped your love was not dependent on status. You tested me. I trusted you. You hid your entire life. I protected it. From me." She paused. There was the old trap, the guilt, the implication that privacy was betrayal, that boundaries were cruelty, that her failure to hand him power excused his failure to be kind. "At first, no," she said. "Eventually, yes." Marcus looked as if she had cut him. Maybe she had. He sank back into the chair. "I was angry this morning. I said things. You said what you believed. I don't believe you're nobody. Now you don't." He looked up, tears standing in his eyes. Elena had seen him cry only a handful of times, once at their wedding, once when his mother nearly died, once after his first major bonus because he said he had finally proven everyone wrong. His tears had moved her then. Tonight, they moved something, but not enough. Vanessa meant nothing, he said. Elena almost closed her eyes. The oldest insult after betrayal. To claim the betrayal was meaningless, as if that made it smaller instead of emptier. She meant enough for you to bring me here, Elena said. I wanted you to see, he stopped. What? He looked away. Say it. I wanted you to see I didn't need you. The room seemed to shrink around the confession. Elena nodded slowly, and did it work? His mouth trembled. No. No, she agreed, because you needed everyone. Vanessa, Arthur, the board, the applause, the title, the hotel ballroom, the photographers. You needed a room full of strangers to tell you that leaving me made you bigger. Marcus bent forward, elbows on his knees. For a second, he looked genuinely broken, not humbled perhaps, but broken. What happens now? He asked. Legal proceedings. With us. Legal proceedings, she repeated. He looked up. You can't just erase 7 years. I'm not trying to. You're acting like none of it mattered. Her voice wavered once, barely. Do you think this would hurt if it hadn't mattered? That silenced him. He stared at her then, really stared, as if finally seeing the cost in her face, the sleeplessness beneath her eyes, the controlled breathing, the careful grip on the folder. Elena Bellamy, billionaire investor, could cancel a promotion with a sentence. Elena Vale, wife, still had to survive the sentence after it left her mouth. I loved you, he said. I know. I don't know when I became this. Elena's heart clenched, despite herself. There it was, the sentence she had once prayed to hear, not an excuse, not fully, a glimpse of self-recognition. But timing was a country, and Marcus had arrived after the borders closed. I do, she said. He looked at her. It was not one moment. It was every moment you chose admiration over honesty, every time you felt small and decided someone else had to be smaller, every time I offered peace and you called it weakness, every time you confused being loved with being owed. Marcus covered his mouth with one hand. Hawthorne's voice came from the phone, dry and low. Ms. Bellamy, we should conclude. Marcus flinched at the name again. Ms. Bellamy. It would haunt him, Elena knew, not because it was hers, because it represented every door he had stood beside without knowing it could open. Elena turned to leave. Wait, Marcus said, was anything real? She stopped with her hand near the door. For a long moment, she could not answer, not because she did not know, but because the truth was larger than yes or no. When you were kind, she said finally, that was real. When I loved you, that was real. When you hurt me, that was real too. People think betrayal reveals that everything before was fake. It doesn't. It reveals that something real was not enough to save what came after. Then she left. Marcus did not follow. The next morning, the story broke before sunrise. Langford & Co. announces leadership review amid executive ethics investigation. By noon, Marcus's face was everywhere in business gossip columns, blurred behind headlines about suspended promotions and undisclosed relationships. Vanessa's name trended higher than his because people loved watching powerful women fall, especially ones who had stepped on other women to climb. Elena's name appeared carefully, officially, as Eleonora Bellamy, chair of the Bellamy Trust. The articles described her as private, influential, rarely photographed. One financial paper used a photo from years ago. Elena at 23, standing beside her father at a port opening, hair shorter, face softer, eyes already guarded. Marcus saw the photo on his phone in the hotel room he had paid for himself after security advised him not to return to the apartment without legal coordination. He zoomed in. Bellamy. The name was on the banner behind her. Bellamy Infrastructure Group, Bellamy Trust, Bellamy Foundation. It had been everywhere, a world hiding in plain sight because he had never cared enough to look. His mother called at 8:14 a.m. He almost did not answer. Marcus, she said, her voice was heavy with sleep and worry. What have you done? Not what happened. Not are you okay. What have you done? That pierced him. I made mistakes, he said. His mother was quiet. She had always liked Elena, more than liked her. After the surgery, she sent Elena handwritten notes every month, thanking her for soup, rides, patience, things Marcus had dismissed as ordinary wife duties. Once his mother had told him, that woman has old sorrow in her eyes, be gentle with her. He had snapped, don't be dramatic. Now his mother sighed, did you hurt her? Marcus closed his eyes. Yes. Then don't ask her to carry your regrets. He pressed his fist against his forehead. Mom. No, listen to me. You have your father's temper and my pride, and neither has ever made a good decision without shame dragging it there first. I lost everything. No, she said, you lost what you worshipped. That feels like everything because you made it your God. He almost hung up. But he didn't. Across the city, Elena sat in Hawthorne's office while lawyers reviewed the divorce filings Marcus had so confidently prepared. Rain streaked the windows, turning downtown into a watercolor of steel and gray. Hawthorne placed a cup of tea beside her, the same blend he had made after her father's funeral, after her mother's will reading, after every major deal that required nerve and left bruises no one could see. You should sleep, he said. I tried. And I kept hearing the glass break. He nodded. Champagne flutes are dramatic little victims. Elena gave him a tired look. I'm old, he said. Let me have my metaphors. She almost smiled. On the desk lay 2 folders. One marked Langford and Co. One marked Vale Divorce. It was strange how paper made heartbreak bureaucratic. 7 years reduced to asset separation, spousal claims, confidentiality agreements, residence transition, personal property inventory. She saw Marcus's signature on the divorce petition. Bold, slanted, impatient. He may contest, Hawthorne said. He has no grounds. Grounds and ego are not the same. Elena leaned back. Will he ask for money? Likely. She looked out the window. He called me a poor nobody yesterday morning. Men have survived larger contradictions. The sentence should have amused her. Instead, it made her ache. Because she knew Marcus, beneath the headlines and fury, he would be spiraling. He would call people who would not answer. He would pace. He would alternate between blaming her and needing her. He would discover how quickly borrowed respect expired. And some part of her, the old part, would want to soften the fall. That was why she had brought Lydia to the office. Lydia sat near the bookshelf, knitting something pale green. She had not said much all morning. She did not need to. Her presence was a guardrail. Hawthorne tapped the Langford folder. The company will survive. Arthur is shaken enough to cooperate. He should have seen it sooner. Yes. He did see some of it sooner. Yes. And ignored it. Yes. Elena turned from the window. Then the revised deal needs more than suspensions. I want oversight authority for 3 years. Independent reporting channel. No retaliation clauses with penalties strong enough to hurt. Leadership appointments reviewed by external auditors for the first 18 months. Hawthorne's eyebrows rose. That is not an investment agreement. That is a moral renovation with teeth. Good. Your father would be insufferably proud. At the mention of her father, Elena's throat tightened. She could see him in memory, large hands, warm eyes, suits that smelled faintly of cedar. He used to take her to construction sites in a hard hat too big for her head. Men in muddy boots would greet him with respect, but he always stopped to speak to the youngest workers too. Buildings remember, he told her once, standing before a half-finished bridge. If you cheat the foundation, the top eventually confesses. She had been 12, she thought he meant concrete. Now she knew he meant everything. Her marriage had confessed, Langford had confessed, Marcus had confessed. All foundations eventually did. 3 weeks passed. The world moved on faster than pain did. Langford issued statements, hired investigators, rearranged leadership, and publicly credited Priya's team. Vanessa resigned before termination could be announced, a move every outlet described as strategic and everyone inside understood as surrender. Arthur remained CEO, but under conditions so strict several board members privately called Elena the quiet guillotine. Priya was promoted, not into Marcus's role, because Elena refused symbolic replacements without preparation, but into a newly created strategy position with real authority, support, and visibility. On her first day in the role, she sent Elena a message. "I'm terrified." Elena replied, "Good. It means you understand the responsibility." Priya wrote back, "That was not comforting." Elena smiled for the first time in days. Marcus disappeared from public view, though not from Elena's life. Divorce had a way of extending presence through paperwork. His attorney argued emotional distress. Hawthorne responded with evidence. Marcus requested a private settlement. Elena offered fairness, not reward. He asked for the apartment. Hawthorne provided ownership documents that made the request vanish. But Marcus did not vanish. He sent emails, some angry, some apologetic, some written at 2 a.m., swinging between memory and accusation. "Do you remember the lake house weekend? I know I was wrong, but you humiliated me beyond repair. I found our old photo album. Was our whole marriage some experiment to you? I'm seeing someone to talk through things. Vanessa used me too. I miss your pastor." Elena read too many of them. Lydia caught her once at midnight, sitting in the dark kitchen, phone glowing in her hand. "Block him," Lydia said. "It's through attorneys now." "That is not what I mean." Elena set the phone down. "He sounds lost." "He is lost, you are not his map." The words settled. Elena blocked the personal email. The next day, Marcus sent a handwritten letter through his attorney. She did not open it for a week. When she finally did, it contained no demands, no accusations, just 3 pages in Marcus's sharp, slanted handwriting. He wrote about the bookstore, about the umbrella, about how he had mistaken her peace for lack of ambition because he did not know how to value anything that did not announce itself. He wrote that Vanessa had appealed to the worst part of him, but that the worst part had already been there waiting. He wrote that he had called his mother and cried. He wrote that he did not expect forgiveness. At the end, he wrote, "I wanted to become someone. I did not notice I was becoming someone I would have hated when you met me." Elena cried then. Not loudly, not dramatically. The tears simply came, as if some part of her had been holding its breath for years and finally trusted the room enough to exhale. She did not go back. That was important. Sorrow was not a door. Closure was not a command to return. She folded the letter, placed it in a box with her wedding ring, and put the box in Hawthorne's office safe until she was ready to decide what memory deserved. Months later, on a warm evening in early autumn, Elena attended the reopening ceremony of the First Meridian property, not as Marcus's wife, not as a hidden investor, as herself. The hotel had been transformed from faded luxury into something alive. Local businesses on the ground floor, affordable office space for startups, training programs for hospitality workers, restored ballrooms, rooftop gardens. Priya stood on stage presenting the integration model with confidence that still trembled slightly at the edges but no longer apologized for existing. Elena watched from the side, wearing a deep green dress Lydia had chosen and the Bellamy signet ring openly on her hand. Arthur approached, older looking than he had months before. "She's excellent," he said, nodding toward Priya. "She always was." "Yes," he said, "we were just too busy rewarding volume." Elena looked at him. "Do better than admitting that." "We are trying." "Try measurably." He laughed softly, You do have a gift for making encouragement sound like an audit. It usually should be. Across the room, cameras flashed. This time, Elena did not flinch from them. A journalist asked for a comment about the project. She gave one brief enough to be useful and dull enough to discourage gossip. Then the journalist, unable to resist, asked about Marcus. Elena paused. The old version of her might have deflected. The wounded version might have sharpened the answer. The woman standing there now chose neither. My former marriage is private, she said. The conduct that affected employees and investors was not. I acted where responsibility required it. The quote ran the next day under a headline about ethical investment. Marcus saw it from a small apartment 2 cities away. He had taken consulting work under a former colleague who believed in second chances but not unchecked ones. The work was unglamorous, the title modest, the pay lower than he once would have considered. He was in therapy because his mother had made it a condition of lending him money for the first month's rent. He hated therapy at first, then he hated how much truth it contained, then he kept going. On his kitchen counter sat 2 things, a cheap coffee maker and a framed photo he had not earned the right to display but could not throw away. It showed him and Elena in their 2nd year of marriage, laughing at something outside the frame. He did not look at it when he wanted her back. He looked at it when he wanted to remember that he had once been loved before he confused love with conquest. He never contacted Vanessa again. She tried once after the investigation ended badly for her. The message was brief. We both got played. Marcus stared at it for a long time before deleting it. For the first time, he recognized the lie before wanting to live inside it. A year after the banquet, the divorce finalized. Elena signed last. The pen felt heavier than it should have. Hawthorne sat across from her, pretending not to watch too closely. Lydia waited outside with tea because some rituals needed witnesses and some needed doors. When Elena finished, she did not feel joy. She felt space. That evening, she returned to the apartment one final time. It had already been emptied of Marcus's things. The rooms echoed lightly. Sunlight fell across the kitchen table, the same table where divorce papers had once landed like a thrown weapon. The coffee stain remained faintly visible in the wood despite Lydia's attempts to polish it away. Elena ran her fingers over it. She could replace the table. She could replace the apartment. She could buy houses on cliffs, penthouses above parks, estates with gates and staff and rooms Marcus would have worshipped. Instead, she stood in the little kitchen and understood that wealth could buy distance, but healing asked for presence. She made tea, sat by the window, watched the city turn gold. Her phone buzzed with a message from Priya. We closed the 2nd Meridian site, under budget, no stolen presentations, no secret hotel receipts, miracles happen. Elena laughed. She replied, proud of you. Priya sent back, also, Arthur said, try measurably, in a meeting today, your disease is spreading. Elena smiled into her tea. Later, Hawthorne called. Are you alone? He asked. Yes. Should I worry? No. Should Lydia? She will anyway. Good, someone should. Elena looked around the apartment. I'm selling it. A pause. Are you sure? Yes. Because of him. Because of me. Hawthorne was quiet for a moment. That is the best reason. Before leaving, Elena took one thing from the bedroom, the old photo album Marcus had mentioned in his emails. She almost left it behind, then decided history did not deserve punishment for what people did with it. Some memories were still hers. She would not let betrayal steal even the good days and wear them as trophies. At the door, she turned back once. The apartment looked smaller than it had when she lived in it. Or maybe she had grown. 2 months later, Elena moved into a restored brownstone near the river, not the grandest property she owned, but the first one she chose without imagining how to explain it to anyone. Lydia took over the garden. Hawthorne complained about the stairs every time he visited. Priya came for dinner and brought terrible wine, which they drank anyway because triumph did not require perfect pairings. On the mantel, Elena placed 3 things: her parents' photograph, the Bellamy signet box, and a small framed note in her father's handwriting. If you cheat the foundation, the top eventually confesses. Guests often thought it was about business. Elena never corrected them. One winter night, almost 18 months after the banquet, she attended a charity gala for the Bellamy Foundation. This time, the room knew exactly who she was. People approached carefully, respectfully, some with admiration, some with calculation. Elena recognized both and feared neither. As she crossed the ballroom, she passed a young woman in a server's uniform being scolded quietly by a donor whose wine had been delayed. The donor's voice had that familiar polished cruelty, the kind that believed money made impatience elegant. Elena stopped. The donor noticed her and immediately smiled. "Ms. Bellamy." Elena looked at the server. "What's your name?" "Mara," the young woman said, startled. "Mara, would you please take a break? Ask Lydia near the east doors for anything you need." The donor laughed nervously. "There's no issue, just a small service matter." Elena turned to him. "Then you won't mind waiting." His smile faltered. It was a small moment. No shattered glass, no projected evidence, no headlines, but Elena felt something settle in her with more satisfaction than the banquet had given her. Power used publicly against corruption was necessary. Power used quietly to protect dignity was sacred. Across the room, Lydia watched and gave the tiniest nod. Elena continued walking. Near the stage, Arthur greeted her with Priya beside him. Priya now carried herself differently, not loudly, not like Vanessa had. She simply occupied space without requesting permission. "We saved you a seat," Priya said. "Near an exit?" Elena asked. Priya grinned. "Near the dessert." "Even better." The gala began, speeches were made, grants announced, scholarships funded. Elena spoke briefly about responsibility, about institutions as promises, about how foundations mattered most when storms came. She did not mention Marcus. She did not need to. He was part of the foundation too, in a way, not because he supported her, but because surviving him had forced her to inspect where she had built her own silence. She had mistaken endurance for grace. She had mistaken secrecy for safety. She had mistaken being underestimated for being protected. Now she understood better. To be unseen by enemies could be useful. To be unseen by the person who claimed to love you was a slow erasure. After the gala, Elena stepped onto the terrace for air. Snow fell lightly over the city, softening rooftops and streetlights. She stood alone, wrapped in a black coat, watching her breath appear and vanish. Footsteps approached. For one strange second, her body remembered Marcus before her mind did. The old tightening, the expectation of criticism disguised as conversation. But it was only Priya, carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate. "You looked like you needed this," Priya said. Elena accepted one. "Thank you." They stood in companionable silence. Finally Priya said, "Do you ever regret how it happened?" Elena knew what she meant. The banquet, the exposure, the night that had become legend in corporate circles, retold with more drama each time until Elena sounded less like a woman and more like a myth with excellent lawyers. "I regret that it had to happen," Elena said. "I don't regret stopping it." Priya nodded. "Sometimes I wonder if I should have spoken sooner." "You spoke when you could." "I was scared." "So was I." Priya looked surprised. "You didn't seem scared." "That's because my dress had pockets, very grounding." Priya laughed, and the sound rose into the snowy air. Below them, cars moved slowly along the river road. Somewhere in the city, Marcus was living whatever life he was building from what remained. Elena hoped, with a distant sincerity that no longer cost her, that he was becoming honest, Not successful, not admired, honest. It was the harder promotion. Priya leaned her elbows on the terrace rail. People still talk about what you said to him. Which part? Your promotion is cancelled, and so is your future here. Alina winced slightly. It was accurate. It was iconic. It was expensive. For him. For me too. Priya grew quiet. Alina sipped the hot chocolate. Too sweet, perfect. When she went home that night, she found Lydia asleep in an armchair, knitting in her lap. Hawthorne had left a stack of documents on the entry table with a note. For tomorrow, do not read tonight. That means you, Alina. She obeyed. Upstairs in her bedroom, Snowlight painted the ceiling silver. Alina removed the Bellamy ring and placed it beside her bed. For years she had worn it hidden beneath fabric, close to her heart, but away from the world. Now it rested openly, catching the dim light. She thought of the girl at the wedding who believed love meant being chosen without a name. She thought of the wife in the blue dress, standing in a kitchen beside cold coffee and divorce papers. She thought of the woman in the banquet hall, walking through doors with security behind her and centuries of family weight on her shoulders. All of them were hurt. The trusting one. The silent one. The one who finally spoke. Alina turned off the lamp. In the darkness, she did not feel like a secret anymore. And somewhere deep beneath the quiet, where grief had once sat with its hands folded, something new began to rise. Not revenge. Not victory. A life.